What is up, guys? TopTierYugioh here, and today I've got an updated Sky Striker deck profile for the current format. And with this being one of the best going second decks as well as one of the best control decks, Sky Strikers are once again in a great position right now. And if you're looking for a relatively cheap, fun, and yet still very competitive deck to play, I definitely recommend Sky Strikers. And so let's just go ahead and get into the list. I think you guys are going to love this one. Alright, so starting with the Sky Striker monsters, we have 3 copies of Ray, 2 copies of Rose, reinforcements of the army to search either one of them, and then the Hornet drones. And so this gives us 7 total Sky Striker monsters, which does give us a 71% chance of opening up with one going second. And that's a very high percentage of getting one, but if we don't open with one, we do also have the 2 copies of Area 0 as well as a copy of Terraforming. And so if we don't open a Sky Striker monster, but we do open up with a ability to get to Area 0, so either one of these as well as the Terraforming, we will still have the 3 copies of Ray, 2 Rose, and 1 Hornet drones in deck to potentially get off of the Area 0, and for that gives us a 45% chance of that occurring. And so there's a very high probability of opening up a Sky Striker monster, which is great for this deck because you need to get into your engine as soon as possible. And so with that same logic though, I have considered playing a 3rd copy of Rose, and I have seen some other lists playing the 3rd copy as well, and I do think it's good because it also gives you another out to Red Eyes Dragoon, because Rose can negate it, because Rose's effect does not target. And that's one potential route I could see people going, but I felt that this was an appropriate number for this deck. I've been very happy with this lineup, and so that's pretty much it for the Sky Striker monsters. And then the only other engine card we play is the 1 copy of Multi-Roll, which is obviously absurd. And then for the Sky Striker utility cards, you play 3 copies of the Shark Cannon, 2 copies of Widow Anchor, 2 copies of Afterburners, and then 1 copy of Eagle Booster. I did choose to not play Jamming Waves in this deck because I felt that in most matchups you're not going to be playing against back row, and the introduction of Dogmatica and Invoked back into the format did tempt me to go back to playing Jamming Waves because they're going to be setting Punishment, and Punishment is kind of annoying, but at the same time, Punishment is an effect that we can dodge with Ray. It triggers Ray in Graveyard, so as long as we have access to Ray, really Punishment isn't that big of an issue. And at the same time, having it not target does come up as well too, but I did think that just the 2 Afterburners was enough in most matchups, because even in that matchup, being able to destroy a Macabre, or at least bait the effect, is good enough. And so I felt that just the Afterburners were enough, as well as the Widow Anchors. And the Shark Cannon's obviously insane in this deck. I mean, there are just so many different uses for it, as well as it allowing us to get into your link plays easier as well. So I definitely like this utility Sky Striker lineup as well. But that's pretty much it for the Sky Striker engine as a whole. Moving on to the hand traps, we play 3 copies of Gamma, 3 copies of Ash, 3 Veilers, 3 Imperms, and then of course Driver is not a hand trap, but the 1 copy of Driver. And I know some people are afraid to play Gamma right now because of the fact that you have to add Driver into the deck, and because of the fact that it's kind of a brick, but at the same time, just the power level of Gamma I think justifies it. Just being able to negate a monster effect as well as remove it from the board forces your opponent to need multiple extenders or even starter cards again to be able to get back into their place, and that's just huge as compared to any of the other hand traps, to where just negating the effect still leaves the monster on board. And so you negate a Needle Fiber, they can just special summon another monster, make a Rorodon, or you leave the Assault up, they summon a Tuner, make Needle Fiber. So in a lot of cases you need more than 1 negate to fully stop them, but with Gamma this can be the 1 card you draw that will completely stop their turn. And this was also the big issue with Nibiru right now, is you give them a token, they special summon a Tuner and make Needle Fiber, or make another player, equip it with Durandal and then search. Like, there's so many ways that other decks can take advantage of monsters just being left on the board, and so Gamma really solves that issue a lot. But it also does protect some of the spell cards that we play, such as the Afterburners and some of the other spells that you're going to see coming up. So Gamma I think is necessary despite the brick, and even though we might banish the Driver with Desires, you just gotta not banish Driver with Desires. But the other hand traps I think are pretty standard. Imperm and Ash are both solid. Veiler is in here because we are playing Needle Fiber, Selene, and Access Code package, and so we definitely need 3 copies of Veiler in that regard. But also, I do think it's good right now because it is one of the few hand traps that does stop a Anaconda. And of course Gamma does, but Ash does not. So it kind of leaves us with Imperm and Veiler for dealing with Anaconda, because we don't want to deal with the Dragoon. It's just very difficult for this deck to deal with naturally, because not being able to target or destroy is literally what all the cards in this archetype do. And so we need to stop them from summoning Dragoon. But that's it for the hand traps. Now let's move into some of the flex spots. Hey guys, sorry for the interruption, but right now I'm actually using Kaina's effect to stop you from continuing through this video until you smash the like button and subscribe to the channel. And so if you haven't already, please take a moment to just like this video and or subscribe to the channel because I really would appreciate it. That's the only way to play through Kaina's effect right now, so you have to do it. But if you did and or you're already subscribed or have already liked the video, I do really appreciate it. But let's go ahead and continue with this awesome deck profile. Alright, so to finish out the main deck, we are playing 3 copies of Triple Tactics Talents, 3 copies of Mystic Mine, and then 2 copies of Pot of Desires. And so Triple Tactical Talents has been an insane addition to this deck. I mean, just like Engage, having a spell card that gets you more spell cards is the best thing you could ask for in this deck. But also just the fact that you can use it to do so many different things, like drawing more cards can be great when you need a ray or access to one of your monsters, or taking control of an opponent's monster is a great way to deal with Dragoon, which again, this deck really struggles to deal with. But there's just so many different situations where you're using all of the effects, like, or even just ripping a card out of the opponent's hand when you know you're going to be able to grind them out as well. So just all 3 of those effects, plus being a spell card, it's really just everything you would want in this deck. It's an amazing addition. But then the Mystic Mines I do think is a bit controversial, and I was always going to play 1 copy of mine, but for this, the second and third copies of mine, it came down for me to be between those, Cosmic Cyclone, Forbidden Droplets, or Dark Ruler No More. All of these were options, but all of these had more problems than I think the Mine did, and I really like the fact that Mine can sometimes just win you a game. Like, if you can stick a Mine on board, there are a lot of cases where you just win, you deck your opponent out, because so many of these combo decks are not playing outs to it in the main deck, and even a lot of rogue decks are starting to drop Cosmic Cyclone from the main, and that can be big. And so I do think Mine was kind of a meta call, but I've really been enjoying it so far. But the issues with the other cards I think mainly are that Cosmic is losing its targets because it seems that Eldritch has been losing a bit of popularity. And then again, versus Dogmatica or Invoked, you don't really have to worry about punishment too much. And so I felt that Cosmic Cyclone was not going to be the best use of space for these final 2 spots. Dark Ruler No More is great against so many different decks for just being able to negate their entire boards and allowing you to just play under it. But the downside is that it leaves all of the monsters on the field, and that can make it difficult to deal with all of them. So even if you negate a Dragoon, it's still 4,000 attack, and so that means you still need to be able to get to an Afterburner or a Widow Anchor or something to deal with the actual card. And this came up a lot when playing against multiple negates. So when you're playing against like Herald, Savage, Charles, sure, you negate all of them and you're able to play, but this engine in this deck is not able to deal with 3 cards that each of them need to be dealt with, or else your opponent can just use them on their following turns to play. And so I really felt that Dark Ruler didn't do a good enough job actually dealing with the threats. And then finally, the Forbidden Droplets is good because it does half the attack, and so it allows you to at least attack over a lot of stuff. Like you can attack over a Savage Dragon or attack over a Charles, and so there's a lot of things that you can attack over once using droplets, and that really helps a lot with both negating their effects as well as getting over the monsters. But the downside is just the resources that you need to use in order to actually activate the card. Being able to, or not being able to, but having to send multiple cards from your hand or field to the graveyard can be kind of hurtful, or not that easy at all times. And so droplets didn't quite seem to be exactly what I needed, but it came in a close second, I think. The other thing I liked about droplets is that it can also be used defensively. That's useful. Or you can also take an opponent's monster with Widow Anchor. Like you take one monster, then you droplets, send that monster to the grave to negate another one, and then deal with that other monster as well. And that can be good when your opponent has multiple things that you need to deal with, multiple threats. And so I did like droplets there. It had a little bit of synergy, but I felt that mine was ultimately the best because it works really well with the Striker engine. It's easy for us to play around, difficult for others to play around, and by itself, it was the only one that's going to win you some games. And so that's why I decided to use these final 2 spots on mine to play a total of 3 copies, and as well it is searchable by terraforming. Another option was set rotation, but I didn't feel that it was necessary in this deck yet. And then finally 2 copies of Desires. But that's pretty much it for the main deck. Let's go ahead and move into the extra deck. For these Sky Striker cards, we're playing 3 copies of Kagari, 3 copies of Shizuku, 2 Hayate. I do really miss the third, but space is so tight. 1 copy of Zeke, and then 1 copy of Kaina. And then for the other extra deck monsters, we're playing one copy of Hida, which you guys were 100% correct about in the last profile. I'm glad you guys convinced me to play Hida because I've been loving it. It's been so great for using to just build up into your access code plays and just also just go into your link monsters a little bit easier. And so the next card I play is a Ningirsu, right? And I will talk about that in a second, but a really cool play that I liked against Invoked that I did the other day was I used Hida to take an Almirage, go into Ningirsu, and then was able to out their board with this. And so there are just so many uses for Hida that I've just been loving it. And then obviously Ningirsu has been a great addition as well. It's kind of necessitated by the fact that Dragoon is so common, but you can use Ningirsu to out Dragoon, and so it gives you an engine way to do that. And so what will happen in a lot of cases is you will, like, your opponent will use Anaconda to summon Dragoon, and then you'll Shark Cannon back the Anaconda, link the Anaconda and like your Kagari or something into Ningirsu and then out the Dragoon. And obviously you need to bait Dragoon first, but this does give you a way to actually deal with it. And so that's what I like about Ningirsu. And also it's good against Charles because a lot of times they'll equip like all of their things to it to prevent them from being targeted, destroyed. It'll be at like 3,500 attack, and so it also deals with Charles well too. And so I do like Ningirsu a lot. And then finally, we do play the Accesscode Selene Needle Fiber package, which just allows this deck to go for games so easily and just out of nowhere. So I definitely like this a lot because this deck does historically struggle with putting damage on board. This gives us an easy way to end the game. And when you combine it with, let's say, like an Eagle Booster, it's very difficult for the opponent to stop this combo from happening. And also, same with Ningirsu. Eagle Booster on this is great because even if you aren't able to bait out their Dragoon effect, you can just Eagle Booster Ningirsu so that they can't negate it with Dragoon, and then you out the Dragoon like that. And so I definitely like these four. Or I guess these are in the other one as well, but I definitely like Ningirsu a lot, and I also like the Access Code package. But if you don't want to play the Access Code package because Access Code is just too expensive, you don't have it, a good substitution, I think, would be Linkuriboh and Hayate. And so the reason I like both of these cards is, one, the third Hayate is huge just for being able to grind, so that's going to help on one end, but also the Linkuriboh I think is big because, again, if you're dealing with Dragoon, you can use Needle Fiber to summon out Valor into Linkuriboh, and then use those to go into Ningirsu. So it gives you more access to your way to out Dragoon and other difficult to deal with monsters. So I think that these are both great additions to the deck. And I know you're losing the ability to put damage on board, you're losing that access code combo, but sometimes replacing something doesn't always mean replacing it with something similar. Sometimes you need to look at the other needs of the deck and the other ways that you can improve the deck, rather than just saying like, oh, I remove access code, so maybe now I need to add like Borosword or something, because Borosword is significantly more difficult to actually use in this deck. So I think a lot of players need to think more about how they're replacing things around. And so if you guys would like to see a video on that, let me know. That's something I've been thinking about, but those would be the best two replacements I think for Access Code and Selene. Again, the third Hayate and the Linkuriboh. So let's go ahead and move into the side deck and wrap this up. So moving into the side deck, we're going to start with 3 copies of Nibiru, which is still very good against a lot of different decks. When you combine that with some of the specific cards that we can add on top of it and the other hand traps, it does become even solid against combo decks, despite them being able to play around and through it. But I still want to have Nibiru in the deck somewhere, and I really love the interaction between it and Rose. Next, we play 3 copies of Dark Ruler No More, which once again is not perfect, but I do still think it's great for dealing with established boards, but just not quite in the main deck in my opinion. But I still might switch these out for droplets, I think. Let me know what you guys think about that though. Should this be Dark Ruler No More, maybe droplets? Let me know. Next, we have 3 copies of Cosmic Cyclone, because even though I don't think this is great in the main deck, I do think it still has to be somewhere in your 60 card list just to deal with like more back row heavy decks and more grindy matchups. It's still a great card, and you need something to side out like your mines for sometimes. And so I think this is a lot of times a great thing to side them out for in those matchups. And then for going first, we have 3 copies of There Can Be Only One, and then 3 copies of Solemn Judgment. Both of these are just insane to draw because your opponents are going to force you to go first in a lot of cases, especially if you win the die roll and choose to go second game 1. Game 2, they're going to make you go first, and so you need to have these in so that you're going to be able to deal with their boards, and in a lot of cases, just win the game due to cards like There Can Be Only One. And so I definitely like these in the side deck as well. But really right now, the side deck is so subjective. We never know when we're going to get a new ban list or how the format could change, and so whatever you guys prefer to side be sure to side it. Like, don't just take my side deck. Play whatever is best in your meta. Play whatever is best for your locals in your testing group or in your friend group. Always, change the side deck to match your specific needs, and that's really what the side deck is all about. But this is just an example of what I've been playing in my side. Let's actually do a couple of test hands. I do want to show you guys how the hands of this deck look, because again, it's incredibly consistent. I just want to be able to illustrate that to you guys. So let's go ahead and just do a couple of test hands really quickly. I've already power shuffled, but I will just do a few more shuffles just in case. As you guys can see, the deck will be completely randomized to the best of my abilities. Let's see what we draw. So Imperm, Gamma, Ray. The glare is kind of bad here, but Desires and Area 0. So double Area 0 sucks, but we have Ray access to hand traps as well as Desires. And so just these specific hand traps as well are very powerful, and most decks are not going to be able to play through that. And so not being able to play through this as well as Ray plus Area 0 is going to be huge. And now, depending on whether you wanted to play the Desires or the Area 0 first, let's take a look at both. And so if we played, like, let's say the Ray Area 0 play, the next 3 cards would be Veiler, Shark Cannon, and Rose. And so we'd have some good options there. But if we tried to activate the Desires first, we'd banish 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And then we would draw into Shark Cannon as well. That's funny. Or the Mystic Mine. And so really good. We have access to our engine. We'd have access to Disruption and the ability to keep on playing. And so this will put us in a really good position in most games. So that's one hand, but let's take a look at another. One hand doesn't really mean anything. I started using KMC sleeves lately, and these feel really good. Just thought I'd say that. But next hand, triple tactical talents, multi-roll, Widow Anchor, Ash Blossom, another Area 0, and then a second Ash Blossom. And so this hand is a little bit tricky because we do have one disruption on the opponent's turn, but it's an Ash Blossom, so it's not very strong. And so we're likely still going to be dealing with an established board. Drawing the Ash Blossom for the 6th card is not the best, but we do have 2 cards in the Widow Anchor and the Tactics that are going to allow us to maybe break an opponent's board. And so one thing that we could do is try to just negate one of the opponent's monsters. Like, you just activate Widow Anchor targeting like their Borloat Savage Dragon, and then that allows us to, they're going to negate, and so that would allow us to just use our tactical talents, and we could use that to maybe draw 2 more cards, which could be a mine that wins us the game. Or what we could do is maybe try to activate the multi-roll. So maybe we play Area 0, activate Area 0, and see if the opponent does anything. We could like set an Ash and use it on that, see if they do anything, and we might, okay, we'd whiff, but that's fine. We could multi-roll it away. The opponent probably negates multi-roll. We can negate whatever they try to negate it with a Widow Anchor, and that also opens up the line of play for the tactical talents. So there are a couple things we could do there, but we want to make sure that somehow we're able to use the multi-roll to get rid of the Area 0. That way we can get access to our Ray and get our engine going. But we do have the tools to do it. It would just be tricky how we do this, and it's hard in an online format to kind of bait opponents and whatnot, but in person, I think with the right technical and mental gameplay, you'd be able to play through a good number of boards with this hand. So this is also pretty solid as well. So let's maybe look at 1 or 2 more. So we have Imperm, Widow Anchor, Rose, triple tactical talents, Ray, and then Gamma. So once again, we have Gamma, Imperm, but this is the 6th card, so it doesn't really count. So we have Imperm to really stop the opponent's play. So that's 1 disruption. We probably still have to deal with the board, but then we draw Gamma as the 6th card, which is really good because we'd be able to really bait the opponent out with like the Gamma and the Widow Anchor. And then we have triple tactical talents as well to deal with whatever's left over, or we could use Widow Anchor to bait 1, Gamma something else, then triple tactics another card. Like, there's a lot of really wonky things you could do. But another thing that does come up is when you only have 1 hand trap like in this hand, something that I always kind of think about is whether or not you want to use this to maybe stop an opponent's play. Like, maybe you try to negate their needle, or maybe you hold this until next turn and try to break their board with it. And so that's kind of a cool thing about Imperm, that you always have the option to do. And so we have the ability to disrupt the opponent as well as break boards on top of having access to our engine. So once again, this is a really solid hand. And so let's look at 1 more hand. This will be the last one. Gamma, Widow Anchor, Veiler, Ray, Driver, and then Shark Cannon will be the 6th card. So in this hand, we at least have access to 2 hand traps. We have Veiler and Gamma, Gamma being a really solid hand trap, but drawing the Driver really does hurt, and so we'd be really forced to depend on these hand traps to keep the opponent from building too strong of a board, and then hopefully we'd be able to capitalize with the Ray and the Widow Anchor. And even if they do end with 1 negate, at least the Widow Anchor can deal with that and we still have Ray, but this still would be a very tricky situation to get out of because we really only have like this 1 card to get into our engine, and we'd probably run out of defense, and it would be very difficult to continue, but not a bad hand, you know. It just depends on what the opponent's playing, what they're able to do, and then how we'd be able to grind them out. And so a playable hand, and that's really I think all you can ask for in a lot of cases. Not bad, not good, but playable and gives you a chance. But that's pretty much it for these test hands. I just wanted to show you guys how consistent this deck could be. If you guys would like to see more test hands with the Sky Striker deck, definitely just let me know down in the comment section, because that's something I'm always open to doing, to show you guys how consistent it is once again, but also how it fares against other decks, how we'd actually be playing through different interactions and different matchups, and how you set things up in this deck, because the technical play is just so important in Sky Strikers that I'd really enjoy actually doing a video like that. And so let me know if you guys would be interested in seeing that. But alright guys, that's pretty much it for this Sky Striker deck profile. Let me know what you guys think about it. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, suggestions, tips, tricks, or whatever, always let me know down in the comment section below. I'd really appreciate it. I still think this deck is great right now, and I think a lot of people are kind of underrating it and not giving it the attention and credit that it deserves, but I still think it's a great deck. Even though the Dragoon is like a hard counter for it, I still think that this is a great deck for most formats overall, and you guys should definitely give it a shot. And so again, if you guys have any questions or anything, let me know down below. I really appreciate your time in watching this video and anything that you guys have to say. Thanks again, and I'll see you in the next video.